It seems like the beginning of August is probably a little bit too late to be showing some Indy 500 footage, but here we are. The Indy 500 on iRacing seems like too big of an event to not put the footage up, and especially as you saw the way it ended for me, you could see that I guess it was worth not skipping, so to say. However, I will say, since you've already seen the way it ended, that this really did take a lot of wind out of my sails when it came to sim racing as a whole for a little bit. As you can tell that this race was in May. We are at the beginning of August. It was the end of May, to be fair, but still, it's a pretty big gap of time. Excuse me. And I have been racing still, but just definitely not with the same enthusiasm, vigor, and definitely not with the same amount of time that I've been spending, for sure. But just moments like we're going to see, experiences, races like we're watching right now have kind of been the norm. It's been a trend for me, and it's really been keeping me from spending a lot of time wanting to sim race. And what will happen, the formula, as it were, will be... we'll be having a really good race. We'll be in a great position. We'll be making smart moves for ourselves, and then somebody else decides to end our race, essentially, in one form or another. And here we are at the Indy 500. You can see we're still up at the front. We're only, inside of lap 10. But, we started at the front, and I got real lucky because, as you know, there were, I forget how many thousands of people that entered this year, and it went by our qualifying time, our average of 4 laps. And so essentially with that many people and my skill level, I was essentially going to be, in my eyes, it could have been random to where I would have been in the field. I wasn't going to be at the top end of a split, and it wasn't going to be by such narrow margins, and I didn't think I was going to be so far down at the bottom where the gaps were going to be so big that you kind of would level out in one place or another. But I expected, to end up maybe, with all that in the middle. But we got pretty lucky starting up pretty close to the front of the split, and we're pretty much just trying to hold on to that. You can see bits of gaps are forming. The tip of the spear is a little bit more spread out than I would have anticipated, even at this early point in the race, especially with all of our cautions. I wouldn't have expected these gaps to have grown to where they're at this point. But I thought that we were gonna be going back and forth a lot more at the front. It was on race day harder to get around cars than it had been in other races, that, of course, that whole week before, and I think even the week before that. When it came to the IndyCar Series and the IndyCar Oval Series, they went back and forth on IMS, and so that we had 2 weeks leading up to the 500 to race here, and so it seemed much easier to get around people. There were more lead changes, there were more position changes, I think, leading up to it for me, and that kind of, I won't say sullied my expectation, but it kind of influenced how easy I thought it was going to be to go from 4th to 1st. And you can see here with that, it is true that once you get the draft, you get to a certain point, you can kind of make things happen if you can get the car lined up in front of you right, and you cannot push too far in the center of a corner there. And I guess I probably could have made this video a lot shorter if I just wanted to highlight that point that I had been making about crashing and about racing with other people in iRacing. But I guess it would be more fun to see the development of this race. And again, the Indy 500 is such a big iRacing event that I definitely wanted to have the footage on my channel. Going forward, I think I might be more interested in doing live commentary, I guess, on these races, recording the audio at the same time as I'm racing from the actual cockpit of the race day. But just right now, that's not a possibility for me in this current situation where I'm at. And so going forward in the future, that's something I'm looking into, and I think it would have made a video like this a lot more entertaining to watch, to listen to this race unfold live, instead of have me tell you how it's going afterwards, especially, in this specific example, how far after this race has ended that I'm, saying what's going on. But you can see here, I am not making good progress. You can see I'm getting a huge run into the entry of turns 1 and 3, which means I'm getting a huge draft coming off the straights, but I'm getting into the aero wash in 3 and 4, or 3 and 2, or I'm sorry, in 2 and 4, which is pushing me off, and so I'm not realizing yet how to capitalize on that and to back off a little earlier, so I don't have to deal with the aero push in that dirty air in the center of corner, so that I can get closer earlier and actually be able to make a pass, and that is something that I didn't experience leading up in those 2 weeks beforehand. That racing with these guys that were pretty smart, pretty defensive, much more racing sharp, a little bit more racing intelligence than just the average lobby. But it's now at this point where I'm thinking I want to do a little bit of a dry run to see how quickly I can get into first place. How easy will it be to be able to make a move? Will it be like sitting with DRS right behind them at IMS and just being able to go around whenever I get close enough? And it wasn't quite that easy. It wasn't what I expected. And I guess everybody else will probably already know that. But you can see I'm making the same mistake here where I'm going to get real close in the entry. Luckily, I take a little bit of a different entry, but it still pushes me wide on exit. I had to slow down a lot more than I wanted, which you can see builds that giant gap between me going into this long straightaway, which means I spend the entire straightaway catching back up to this guy's bumper instead of getting around and getting some speed earlier, which is only helping the guy behind me, and it's only helping the guy in front of me because he can see a weakness, right? He knows he has something to work with now. Because when you're, in front at Indy, you're just flat out, right? You have your line choice, and that's about it. Because there's not a whole lot else going on other than turning the wheel. So the only thing that he can do is make sure to keep putting himself on the line. That's going to give me trouble with that dirty air because I keep putting myself in that situation. So all he has to do is play to that. And if I was a little bit more aggressive, I would have blocked that draft. I would have stayed in the draft myself, but that is something that people were doing, again, in those 2 weeks prior that I was really hating. People were really blocking with these Indy cars like they were, tin top NASCAR cars and, big, strong, sturdy cars, and that was really frustrating because I'm not going to end my race, or rather both of our races, but I'm not going to end my race over something so stupid. But sometimes they just, as you saw at the very beginning with what's going to happen later, sometimes they really just force the issue, they force the wreck, so to say. And there's nothing much you can do about it. And I don't want to be that person, right? I don't want to cause the incident. And most importantly, I don't want that damage to happen to myself. So I really try to avoid doing that as much as I can. But I want to keep myself at the current position that I'm at and not necessarily move backwards. We're still in, this first stint, right? We're still coming up to the end of it. We're not quite at the end of it, but we're almost at the end of it. You probably get to at least 33 laps. But here we are in second place in that first part of the stint, and I feel like I'm sitting pretty, especially looking at these gaps going back. There's a little bit of a buffer behind our podium position, behind third place. And so really we're just kind of running our race here, and if we can keep passing each other cleanly and just making ourselves faster and faster and faster, we can kind of run away with this as long as we stay green. And we seem to be finding, a nice green flag stretch here, so it was a big possibility. However, here are some crazy moves, and here's where my race is going to go sour here. And you can see that the car launched right over us. We were the ramp, not necessarily the car in the air, but still a huge component in that race, and that is obviously our day done. Especially looking at this replay, this is just an unnecessary block by this red, white, and blue car. I really don't know what they're thinking. 2 blocks, and then they pretty much just wrecked me in that. And then they got real mad at me in chat and started spewing a bunch of hateful stuff to me for their fault. But anyway, that was my Indy 500. Incredibly frustrating. Let me know how yours went.